Remember Dr. Ben Carson? He was a guest speaker along with the president at the Fellowship Foundation National Prayer Breakfast in Washington. And while Dr. Carson spoke the truth about the bloated national debt, the terrible healthcare system that was broken, if you followed the eyes of Obama, my God, they were like daggers. They were like daggers. You could see it, the hatred. But here's what was funny. After Valerie Jarrett alleged that the good doctor bushwhacked the president. What are you, nuts? But we have the doctor with us right now, and we're going to ask him, did he bushwhack the poor president? Welcome, doctor.
Thank you very much. I've never quite heard it put that way before, but no, I did not bushwhack him. If it had been Bush, I guess it could have been bushwhack.
There you go. Hey, you got to get your own show. Don't take my job. No, we're very pleased to have you, doctor.
Well, thank you.
And I want to also, before we begin, let people know about this, who you are. My God, you're credited with being the first surgeon to successfully separate conjoined twins joined at the head. That to me was like a miracle. I mean, that just I'm in awe of that.
Joined at the back of the head. It was a team effort. I was fortunate to be, able to lead that team, and it involved a lot of people. We had to have fantastic cardiothoracic surgeons and plastic surgeons and intensivists and super anesthesiologists and circulating nurses.
Oh, man.
Some of the nurses actually created drapes that had accordion sleeves on them so that when we pull the beds apart, the drapes would fall into place and maintain sterility. It was really a team effort.
And that brings us to this health care. You know, we're buried in this affordable health care. And by the way, being buried, I want to ask you this. The other day I was going through some of the health care rules and regulations, and in there, the president made a deal with the insurance companies if they would be willing to keep their premiums very low throughout the election. And even if they lost money because they didn't want these premiums going up during the election cycle, that Obama promised, hey, we'll go get the money from the Federal Reserve and we'll make up the losses for you. But God, that seems like a felony.
It should be. I mean, the kinds of things that they've been doing. But what I'm hoping and praying for is that the electorate is not quite so buried in their social media and, Dancing with the Stars and all these things, that they don't notice what's going on, that they don't notice the continual delays and the manipulation of the system so that you don't get the full impact of what's going on until after it's too late to do anything about it. I believe that a large segment of the population is more savvy than that, but unfortunately there are some who are quite easily manipulated.
Well, the other problem, the liberal press, and I don't know if you believe as I do, that the administration, CNBC, the rest of them, they rather have the poor be poor rather than become working poor. I mean, just like it just seems to me like the liberal media and the liberals, they hate the working poor for the example they set for the ideal non-working poor. And after all, don't the liberals have a vested interest in keeping poor people poor? Otherwise, it would make their liberal causes harder to sell. Am I correct?
Without question. And when you look at societies that move from free societies like we've had for a long time to socialist societies, you always see the same pattern. A small group of powerful, wealthy elites at the top, a rapidly shrinking middle class, and a very large, expanding dependent class.
Yeah, and I like what you said. You said that Obamacare was never about health care, it's about control.
Correct.
And it's the worst thing that's ever happened since slavery. Let me play this cut from Reagan.
One of the traditional methods of imposing statism or socialism on a people has been by way of medicine. It's very easy to disguise a medical program as a humanitarian project.
God, it sounds just like you. I mean, that fits it, doesn't it?
It's exactly right. And if you look at some of the writings of neo-Marxists like Saul Alinsky, he talks about the fact that the best way to fundamentally change a society like ours is to make the population dependent.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to do that is by taking control of their health care. And, there's a lot of stuff. I recommend to people that they read Saul Alinsky's book called Rules for Radicals so that you can see the things that are happening and put them into perspective. And just as a piece of information, look at the dedication page. You'll
Mm-hmm.
see that book was dedicated to Lucifer, the original radical who gained his own kingdom. Gives you some idea of what we're dealing with here.
And again, going back to the liberal media, I mean, I don't think Obama would be president today if the media in 2007, 2006 really went into his background and who his mentors were. But like you said a moment ago, I think I think Hollywood is designed to have all these shows, Who's Dancing with the Losers and all these crazy shows they got on, so that people, their mind is so clogged up. And I love sports, and everybody's so into sports that he's getting away with all this stuff at the VA and all. Don't you agree? They're just
absolutely. And if you read a book called The Naked Communist, which was written in 1958 by Cleon Skousen, it outlines the whole progressive agenda, including taking over the media and being able to utilize that for mind control and dumbing down the population. So that they would be much more interested in the basketball game and who's on Dancing with the Stars than they are on the actual things that are going on, and won't even notice that the fabric of their nation is being changed right under their feet, and nobody can talk about it because of the imposition of political correctness.
And it's amazing that how they dupe the people into thinking the economy is doing much better than it is. Listen to this. This was the Philly Fed President Charles Posner the other day. Listen to this, and we got 2 minutes here. And then hold on.
I want to give you some very optimistic and hawkish comments from Philly Fed President Charles Posner. He says the economy is on the firmest footing since the recovery began, and the first quarter slowdown was weather-related and not a risk to the underlying recovery. He's expecting still, unchanged in his forecast, 3% growth in 2014, and sees more upside than downside risk.
Do you believe this when this whole market's been propped up by quantitative easing? And your comment?
It's totally amazing that they would expect anybody to believe that, and believe that the unemployment rate is getting better, when it's in fact the wrong number to be looking at. You should be looking at the labor force participation rate, which is steadily going down as more and more people drop out of the job market and depend on government subsidies. This is getting to be a very different country. This used to be the can-do nation. It's turning into the what can you do for me nation. But that's why I wrote the book, One Nation, that people can actually dissect all of this out, see exactly what is being done, and then they can make a decision. Is that really what they want? Or do they want a nation where people take on responsibilities for themselves, are able to move much faster, much higher, where the 47% can get out of the 47% and move up to any percent that they want? This is what America is all about.
Gang, all my listeners, please get his book, One Nation, and it's Dr. Carson's book. It's a wonderful book. Don't miss it. We'll be right back with Dr. Ben Carson right after this message, and don't forget his book. My special guest and a special person, Dr. Ben Carson. We just hoped that he would throw his hat in the ring to run for president. Doctor, I want to play the response that Obama had to this VA crisis, and then get your response.
Once we know the facts, I assure you, if there is misconduct, it will be punished. I expect that full report from Rob next month. We have to find out, first of all, what exactly happened, and I don't want to get ahead of the IG report. I want to see what the results of these reports are, and there is going to be accountability. I am going to make sure that there is accountability throughout the system after I get the full report. I am going to do everything in my power, using the resources of the White House, to help that process of getting to the bottom of what happened and fixing it. But I'm also going to be waiting to see what the results of all this review process.
Oh, I can't handle it. 50 Inspector General reports since 2008, and your response, I can't handle it.
Well, I just have to laugh. It's a little bit amusing because a couple of days ago, he's enraged. He was even more enraged than Shinseki. So what's he enraged about if he doesn't know what's happening? I don't understand. The two things are not compatible, are they? and you'll remember he was outraged when the IRS thing came about, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. And then later on, it's a phony scandal. So I don't know what this all. I will say one thing: it is outrageous.
I've got to believe that the general, when he took the job in 2009, that he had to sit down with the administration. They had to say to him, here's the 50 Inspector General reports. We've got a problem with these fake waiting lists. Here's the report that came from the Bush transition folks. Or did they hide it from him? I can't believe that. He had to know about it.
No, of course he did, because he commented on it way back then.
Right.
So clearly he knew about it. But, in recent times, prevarication, lying, just doesn't really seem to be much of a big deal. So there's no consequences for it. So, nobody even remembers it. So why even worry about it?
We're talking to Dr. Ben Carson. Make sure you pick up his new book, One Nation. Do you think for a moment that this is the VA? These are union workers, and we know how important the union is to this president, this administration. Do you think when the general took the job that the president, the administration said to him, maybe not the president directly, but somebody said to him, don't go in there and disturb these union people. We got to get reelected in 2012. For heaven's sakes, don't go and take their bonuses away from them.
Well, that certainly wouldn't surprise me.
Right.
Almost nothing would surprise me from what we're seeing here. But, the real key here, and again, one of the reasons we wrote the book, is we want people to recognize that they play a role. We don't have to just sit here and complain about it. We can actually change it. We, the American people, are at the pinnacle of power in the way that our nation is structured. But we have to use that power in an intelligent way, and we have to become informed so that we know how to do it. And it means due diligence. Don't just listen to what your congressman or your senator says they voted for. Actually check the records out. See what they voted for. Talk to your friends, your neighbors, your associates, your colleagues at work, and have meetings. What kind of nation do you want to have? What do you want to pass on to your children and your grandchildren? Encourage each other. That's the only way you get around the mainstream media. Become informed. And then we can make the kinds of decisions that will put this country on the right course once again. And once that's the case, we don't have to involve in any punitive measures against other people. We need to govern by the Constitution in a way that is truly fair for all.
Doctor, let's talk about your book. First of all, who did you target when you thought of this book and putting it together? And go over a couple of the chapters that you want to share with us that you think are very important
Sure.
that people have
Well,
to learn.
I was targeting all of the American people, and when talking about our responsibilities to those coming behind us in that particular chapter, that we can't throw them overboard because the people who were before us didn't throw us overboard. But that's exactly what we're doing financially right now. I grew up in Detroit, and I talk about that in the book and how it was at one time the most prosperous city in the nation, and how we went from that to the largest bankruptcy is not taking responsibility fiscally, kicking the can down the road. It wasn't just the unions being greedy, because that's what the unions do. They get everything they can. They gladly strangle the goose that laid the golden eggs just to get the egg. But, there are, responsible, supposedly, executives in the big auto industries who knew what the results of conceding to these unions would be, but they also knew that they would have their golden parachute and be long gone by that time. Well, we're doing the same thing with our future. We can't possibly hate our progeny so much that we don't care about what happens to them. We can do better than that. So, I talked a lot about that. I talked a lot about health care, the most important thing that a person has, and that's the reason that I don't want to turn it over to the government. That's the worst thing that you can possibly do. And, I come up with real solutions. At the end of each chapter, there are action steps, what you as an individual can do. Because a lot of times people are inspired, but they just feel powerless. But we all have power, both individually and collectively, and we can take care of these problems quite effectively. But one of the keys is we must begin to talk about it. We cannot allow this veil of silence to be imposed upon us that the progressives have placed political correctness being the main one of them. If we sit back and just go along to get along because we don't want an IRS audit, we don't want our jobs challenged, we don't want anything disturbed, then we will lose by default. And when I say we, I'm talking about Americans with common sense and the kind of values that made us into the pinnacle nation of the world.
And, we only have a minute left. And, of course, two things. One, I want to ask you if you're thinking of running independent or Republican.
Well, I certainly wouldn't run as a third-party candidate. If I ran, I would run as a Republican.
Okay.
But, I will continue to consult God, continue to look at what's going on. Obviously, I'll be very interested in November to see if the people are willing to make the kind of changes that need to be made. If they're not willing to do that, then why would you even put yourself out there? But we'll keep all of these things under consideration.
And I want to get you back because the real story about you as the person, the man, is amazing to me as to your background, your upbringing, and that when they're talking about the people who are living in the inner cities and they're having problems and they can't get out. God, what an inspiration you are as to what you went through, and we got to get you back and talk about the real Dr. Ben Carson. It's amazing your life, okay?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for coming, and we beg you to run.
Okay.
Okay. That's Dr. Ben Carson. Get his book.